And we are currently live on Facebook, so we will get started right now. And I want to say thank you very much for joining us this evening. We're going to be discussing Juneteenth, recognizing and understanding the importance and significance of this day. This is the Novi Public Library. I guess you know that if you're on our Facebook page and Zoom, I'd like to welcome our special guest. It is my pleasure to have Mr. Kevin Scott, who is a professional crisis and trauma specialist. We also have Mr. Arlanda Walker. He is a criminal justice advocate, and Ms. Dr. J. Marks. He has so many titles. I can just name one thing, is the diversity and equity consultant for open schools. Is that part one? Okay. But welcome, gentlemen. This is the first time I think I've ever had no, maybe second time I've had all gentlemen as my guest. So my pleasure. I'm going to get started right now with Mr. Kevin Scott. I'd like you to offer some greetings to our audience today and maybe introduce some of your brothers, right? In one way.
Correct. First of all, thank you so much, Gail, for having us to engage in this wonderful, phenomenal plenary conversation about Juneteenth. My name is Kevin Scott, and I am a part of the greatest fraternity on the planet, joined by my fellow mighty Omega men, Dr. Marks and Brother Arlanda Walker, as we discuss this wonderful event. I am the Social Action Committee Chair in serving that capacity. So I'm just excited to delve into this plenary conversation about Juneteenth and just to bring some educational platforms to have a very robust dialogue. So thank you, Gail, for this wonderful opportunity.
Very good, thank you. And greetings from you, Mr. Walker.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Arlanda Walker. I got my undergrad degree from Morehouse College in criminal justice, and I got my master's at Wayne State in criminal justice as well, where I studied and focused on criminal rehabilitation methods for ex-convicts. So I'm excited to be here and just ready for the conversation and dialogue.
Absolutely. And greetings from you, Dr. Marks.
Good evening, family. My name is Jay Marks. I am a diversity and equity consultant at Oakland Schools, which is the intermediate school district in Oakland County. I have the great fortune, privilege, and pleasure of working with educators, students, and families and communities on issues of race, ethnicity, culture, diversity, equity, and social justice. As my eloquent fraternity brother Scott mentioned, it is a pleasure to be in community with you, the city of Novi, but it's a double pleasure to be in community in you with my fraternity brothers as we engage in this conversation about Juneteenth. So Gail, thank you for having us, and community, thank you for showing up, spend this time with us this evening.
Very good, thank you, appreciate it. For those of you who are listening through Facebook, if you do have questions throughout our program, feel free to type them in the comment section. I am monitoring them and will do my best to address them to our panel, as well as those that are joining us on Zoom. If you have any questions, as I mentioned, if you didn't hear me, you can type them in the chat section, or you can actually open up your mic and camera and pose the question yourself anyway along the program, or you can wait until the end, okay? Let's start right in. We're going to talk about Juneteenth. Gentlemen, someone talk about what Juneteenth is. You can start right there because, actually, I'm asking this question. Actually, I was thinking about, should we do a what is Juneteenth, or should we just do a celebration of Juneteenth? And I think so many people in many areas don't really know what the importance is of this day. So let me start with Mr. Scott. Can you talk about what Juneteenth is?
Sure. Well, Juneteenth is actually took place in Texas, in Galveston, where the federal troops rode into Galveston to announce the ending of slavery. Now, keep in mind, in order to put Juneteenth in its historical context, both in the American historical context, but also in the African American history's historical context, we have to understand some of the pervasive issues that led up to Juneteenth. Now, keep in mind that Texas and South Carolina were considered strongholds during the Civil War. And even though Abraham Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation earlier, they were still extremely and vehemently recalcitrant about letting this labor force, if you would, be exposed and to the newfound freedoms and liberties that free slaves had now been beset amongst themselves. So the federal troops had to actually ride into Galveston and to formally just announce this and declare that these slaves were in fact free some almost a year after Abraham Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation. So it is so important to understand and recognize Juneteenth from that historical context. And as we bring it forward, even today, that we recognize that these liberties or laws, if you would, that we feel that have been signed into law and provide us these inherent liberties of the Constitution are not freely given, that we still have to continue as African Americans to fight for these liberties. And there's other legislation that is on the same platform that will be parallel to Juneteenth. I won't get into that because I'll keep it just indigenous to the topic of the day. But that in a nutshell is Juneteenth, and it is so good to see even locally that is getting the traction and recognition. So many communities are recognizing Juneteenth, as you see promulgated on the news and things of that nature. So I would definitely give my distinguished colleagues a chance to jump in if they want to add any remarks to it, or if you want me to continue further, I will, Gail. But at this time, I will pause and allow my brothers to jump in.
Sure. Anyone else like to comment on what Juneteenth is? All of the information we have to work with will be appreciated. Gentlemen?
Brother Scott did an amazing job of introducing the topic and providing historical context. I just think it's important for us to know that these enslaved Africans continue to function via their enslavement, right? I don't use the word slaves because, you know, Black people, we know our history. Black people were never slaves in this country. Black people were never slaves in this country. Black people were enslaved in this country. Africans were free people, their own land, own customs, own culture, own language, own civilizations, own ways of being, norms, cultures and practices, systems of government, right? And who were captured, held in bondage, and legally enslaved in this country for over 250 years. And that's not even including Jim Crow. I'm just talking about the legal enslavement of Africans. And so to know that 2.5 years after this Emancipation Proclamation was signed, that the enslavement of Africans were still happening in this country is just mind-blowing. It's just mind-blowing. So, Brother Scott, so June 19th is a way to acknowledge that, honor that struggle, name that struggle, but then celebrate. And I'll talk a little bit more about the celebration of it later. So, Brother Scott, thank you for providing that context for us.
Absolutely. And then we're in America. What do you say to those who say, why is 4th of July not enough? Independence of America as a whole. Who can speak on that?
Well, the reason why 4th of July is not enough is because we were not free during the 4th of July when the United States received their independence. There was 400 years of slavery, and during that, I think it was in the 1700s when we got our independence, we were still in shackles and chains, and we didn't have those liberties that, you know, the white people had, or, you know, other races had that celebrate independence. So Juneteenth is our Independence Day because that's when we were able to pretty much call ourselves American citizens. Even though, you know, during that time, even though we really wasn't free, that's just really when the United States decided to denounce slavery, in my opinion. But, you know, it's not enough because during that time, they didn't have Black people in their mindset for during independence anyway. It just wasn't for us. You know, that wasn't independence for all people, you know, just independence for the people in power, you know. We didn't even view us as people, you know, so.
So
Yeah,
here's yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And just to continue, excuse me, in that vein of thought, Gail, to continue with that, absolutely correct. You have to understand that the Civil War, or the issue of enslavement, as my fellow Brother Mr. Dr. Marks has educated that we were never slaves, we're enslaved. We were slaves, so I appreciate that uplift. So following that in that frame of mind, that the pervasiveness issue, the elephant in the room at the time of the era in our history was slavery. Okay, and it was there's two things that precipitated the Civil War. The first one was in 1852 with the publishing of Uncle Tom's Cabin. The other one was in 1850 with the Compromise of 1850. They all addressed or were spearheaded the issue of slavery. And Abraham Lincoln himself knew that if he ran his presidency on a platform of slavery, he would lose. So he did not. So he dialed that back. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is this, that because even as enslaved individuals, Black people knew that they did not, or not, were not extended those civil liberties. It was not until the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, and not until 2.5 years later, that we began to start understanding on a very minute level of our role and our place in society.
Understand. Here's a question that I have, and I've heard it often. Why should areas recognize Juneteenth? And I'm talking particularly areas that are not highly populated with African Americans. This is Novi Public Library. Why should Novi, speak to Novi, why should Novi recognize Juneteenth? It doesn't really necessarily impact them, or does it, the city? Or any city that's not highly populated in African American race.
I want to back up to that, the second question, the aforementioned question around why is July 4th not enough. I want to add to what my brothers have just shared.
Sure.
And I want to quote to one of my heroes. You can see I'm wearing his shirt today, right? It was either wear a shirt and tie or this. So
that one's good enough.
I went to pay homage.
You have the shirt and tie covered over there with Mr. Walker.
Yeah. We put the young brother, we let the young brother do that. We pay homage to our brother, Frederick Douglass. But to quote abolitionist Frederick Douglass during the speech he delivered on July 5th in 1852, Rochester, New York. It was supposed to be a 4th of July celebration, right? Independence Day celebration. And I want to just give this brief quote and turn to respond. And this quote right here just sums up anything I could ever say in terms of why is 4th of July not enough. Frederick Douglass said in his speech, it's just a quote, "What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer," he says, "a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim." Frederick Douglass. See, Black people in America were enslaved during this time, as both brothers acknowledge, right? And were not even considered full human beings, right? And so this is a part of the hypocrisy of this country, right? That we could celebrate independence of a country while holding legally in bondage a whole race of people, right? That's a part of the hypocrisy, right? So we can't talk about the glory of the country and not talk about, the stuff, the ugly stuff. We can't talk about the beauty and not talk about the ugliness. We got to talk about it all, right? And so that's a part of the hypocrisy of this country. And when we think about 4th of July, and as brother Walker and brother Scott named, who was that for? Because they weren't talking about people who look like me or you, right? They were talking about a very specific group of people. So I just wanted to share that quote because Frederick Douglass was just a bad brother. And he was saying things in 1852, right? That folks still ain't ready to hear today in the year 2021, right? I will, and then I'll lead us off with this next one, and then I'll turn it over to my frat brothers, just in terms of why should this day be recognized? Juneteenth is America's history. It's American history. It ain't Black history. It's America's history. It belongs to all of us, right? It belongs to all of us. And it belongs to all of us to know it to recognize it, to honor it, and to celebrate it, right? There's a sister named Onita K. Bell. She wrote an article. And in her article, she said it should be a part of our collective, Juneteenth now she's talking about, it should be a part of our collective knowledge of freedom struggles in this country so that today's youth, our babies, can continue to fight to ensure that the promise of absolute equality is realized. Our young people, all young people in this country need to know the truth about our history and the reasons that parts of our history have been hidden from our awareness and consciousness. So we have to be critical and analytical in our questioning and examination of America's history. We have to ask ourselves, why isn't this information, and Gary, you named it, why is this information not written in our history books?
Absolutely.
In college, right, in the late 80s, right, and in post-college when I learned about Juneteenth. Why is this not in our history books, right? Why is this not a part of how we tell the story of the history of this country? Does America have something to hide? And that's just a rhetorical question. That's just something I put out there. Does America have something to hide? So I'll turn it over to my fraternity brothers for their responses.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I kind of want to jump into that because that's been one of my biggest issues with American history is that we, our history is based off a one-dimensional perspective to where we only look at it from the lens of white people, the people who write the books. I mean, we have 1 month, the shortest month, you know, for Black History Month, you know, still rooted that because, you know, my brother, frat brother helped start that, but that's another thing. But, but we have the shortest month and, you know, we try to cram all Black history into this small month, you know, and even during that, if you know, I remember growing up in, it wasn't until I actually got to Morehouse to where I actually learned that Christopher Columbus really started slavery, you know, and I celebrated that holiday when I was a little kid, not knowing that, you know, that's really the day that my people were, you know, enchained. So, you know, everything is, I feel like, and I know if you have another question, but, you know, I'll try my best to tie it in.
Fine. Mm-hmm.
But I just feel that, you know, the people who write these history books or just white people in general, they try to minimize or look at slavery through a micro lens. And because we tried our best to not think about the bad in American history, but think about all the good. And all the good that they put out in American history is what white people have done and, you know, our independence and things like that, but it's never about the negative. And for us, you know, 400 years of slavery, 400 plus years of slavery, that's a big part of American history, you know, and we try to cram all of that into a 1 month of studies, you know, that should be probably talked about more than anything in American history, in my opinion. But, you know, yeah, that's all I have on that. Sorry.
No problem. I got it. And then kind of back to where I asked the question about cities that don't have the higher population of African Americans. Can you speak directly to them about this? Is it, maybe I'm going to make it a two-part question. Is it considered being a racist if you don't see the importance of recognizing the day? Or is it just a lack of education and understanding why it should be recognized? And I'm going to say a part of that, thank you to the Novi Public Library who officially voted to make Juneteenth a recognized day with the library, and they are closed on that day. So thank you to the board, library board, for that. Yes, so anyone for that question?
Well, kudos to the Novi Public Library. I'll jump in to that and understand this, Gail, that these type of conversations, first of all, are difficult and uncomfortable, and they should be. In order to stretch people, in order to bring people to a place and a plateau that is mutually understandable, there has to be a confluence of commonality, if you would. Understand that a lot of individuals who may not be of African-American descent or culture may come back and push back as to, well, why do I need to understand this? Well, we recognize every other culture. Every other people are ethnicities and backgrounds are recognized. I give a lot of credit. One thing about, and I won't get into a debate about the Holocaust and slavery, but one thing, and I don't want to offend anybody, so I'm going to be very, very, very chastity and delicate when I present this. One thing about the Holocaust, the Holocaust survivors, those descendants they take tremendous pride in remembering that. And they take tremendous pride in never letting the world know the atrocities that were inflicted on their ancestors during the Holocaust. So why is it that when Black people hold that same standard up across the board, we are viewed as angry? People want to say, well, that was so long ago. That was my ancestors and not me. Well, the reverberations psychosomatically are still causing ripples through our generations, through generation after generation. And I give Dr. Marks a great amount of credit, because I'm a firm believer. And like my younger brother Arlanda Walker, a lot of us are not even exposed to Juneteenth, and it's a shame to say this, until our early 20s, and we're educated. You're talking about educated men, one with a doctorate, who it wasn't until his early 20s, late mid 20s, to where we're even exposed to even knowing what Juneteenth is. That is a horrendous display of educating our culture. And so, and going back to what Dr. Mark says, that we should educate our young babies. It should be taught in school. And I'll use that as my segue for helping people who are not of African American culture to be exposed to other issues or other norms and mores of the Black culture, to find out that there is more to it than just the Emancipation Proclamation. There are other things that took place that are encompassing and make us whole. And when it's taken in its totality of circumstances, we have a much better understanding that we're just not looking for handouts and welfare and that type of thing, that we are a very prideful people and we take pride in our legacy. So give voice to that. That's what I would say, Gail.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to comment after that one? That was good.
I'll let you go, Jamie.
Oh, you go ahead, Landa. I'll come
Hey,
after you.
Marcus. All right. So what I want to add to that, I agree 1,000% with Brother Scott said. For me, I know I didn't learn pretty much any real Black history until I got to Morehouse. And I mean, that's being at a HBCU. I never celebrated Juneteenth. My parents didn't celebrate Juneteenth, because, we didn't know what it was, to be honest. And my parents weren't, didn't come from like the most educated backgrounds or anything like that. So all that was new information to me. And looking at it now, even after doing more research and everything on it, I think partially back in the day why Juneteenth celebration slowed was probably because, even though we celebrated being free, we really wasn't free, because, it was a rise in lynching. There was, Jim Crow laws that kind of just knocked out everything that happened, with, the Emancipation Proclamation. You got imprisonment, Black men and women being in prison at higher rates than any other race, period. War on drugs. So we had all these other things that kind of, threw a cast over our celebration of just one big freedom, because we were still fighting so many other battles anyway. Civil War, yes, the actual bloody war was over, but that's the civil fight is still something we're fighting today, and I think that's one reason why maybe where it's been hard to kind of focus on the actual Juneteenth celebration. But yeah, I don't, I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit, but I mean, to add back into your actual point, when you said that, do I think it's racist, or if white people choose not to celebrate it? I don't necessarily think it's racist, but hear me out. I don't think it's racist if the person just doesn't know about Juneteenth, but I do think that it has racist backing if a person chooses not to. Like if they know about it and say, oh, I'm not celebrating that garbage or whatever it is, I do think those are racist tendencies. I do think there are a lot of ignorant white people who just don't know Because again, like myself, I didn't celebrate it because I didn't know about it. But if there are somebody who actually knows about it and see Black people celebrating and they have an issue with that celebration, then yes, I think that is racist thought. I mean, and again, I mean, America is just inherited racist. You know, our ideologies are is based on racist thoughts, based on, you know, white people being in power and, you know, Black people not being seen as human. You know, even back in slavery days, you know, Black people weren't allowed into the plantation's household, but they were allowed their dog in the house. You know, so I mean, you know, so we were looked at less than actual a dog. So I mean, it's different things like that to where I think now there are so many old ideologies that so many non-Black people are born with, and even unlike some of these places where they don't see a lot of Black people. It wasn't to me until I got into the workplace where I met somebody who said, "You're like one of the first Black people I actually met outside of seeing on TV." So I guess, you know, for me, I just hearing stuff like that. I think that if a person is not willing to understand our struggles and just not willing to listen, then I do think those are some racist thoughts that that person may have. But if that person is willing and all of that and just don't know, then I think it's just overall ignorance that they just, you know, wasn't exposed to that, you know, type of Blackness, you know, if that answered your question.
Absolutely. I have one more question that's on my mind. I'm trying to figure out how I want to pose the question. And it has to do with, and I guess you don't really compare holidays, but how much significance or relevance is Juneteenth as compared to, say, the 4th of July? Should African Americans or should Americans be satisfied with just closing a business for the day, or feel free to take the day off if you want? How should the two holidays equate, or should they, or should it be, you know, 4th of July, Juneteenth, and everything else? Just because maybe there's so many other cultures that have days that they want to recognize. Can you address that, please?
So Gail, I'm going to go back a couple of steps and I'm going to move us forward.
Okay.
Comment on the why should non-Blacks care. I want to comment on the part of the question around, is it racist not to know or not to care? And then I'll briefly address the priorities or what you named. One, I want to say in terms of why should non-Blacks care, in addition to the aforementioned that my frat brothers named so beautifully, one could also argue, and I'm serious here, one could also argue for this, non-Blacks should care for the same reasons that Black, brown, and indigenous people are supposed to care about and celebrate aspects of American history that continue to perpetuate our marginalization and oppression in our society today, right? And these celebrations do so by providing an inaccurate, unbalanced, and exclusive depiction of our history. For example, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Brother Walker mentioned earlier, Columbus Day, right? We're supposed to want to celebrate these things, although they're historically inaccurate, right? They continue to marginalize, right? Minoritize and oppress Black, brown, and indigenous folk, right? But we're supposed to, these are supposed to be important to us. Why? Right? So, and I'm gonna go, my why to that is into that question around what Arlanda talked about in terms of being racist, right? Because when you think about our schools and you think about our students, how do these false and inaccurate stories, pictures, views, how do they impact kids? How do they impact us as a society? False and inaccurate teachings about our history as a country has exacerbated a sense of entitlement and privilege for our white students by inflating their existence and contribution to America's history as racialized beings. What do I mean by that? They have the privilege of opening up textbooks and seeing people who look like them as the creators, the inventors, the leaders, the builders, the thinkers, right? Then they get the benefit of turning on television and seeing the same thing. and looking at other modes of media and seeing the same thing. Okay? And that's extremely dangerous. That's extremely dangerous, right? Because if all I see is people who look like me, right, as leading, and then people who look like someone else as less than human, not being represented, devalued, dehumanized, what am I supposed to do with that? Other than to think higher of myself and possibly lower of someone else. I want to get back to that question, and Brother Walker talked about this in terms of, is it racist, right? I want to be clear, for me, as a diversity and equity consultant, right? I operate from the premise, immediately in these conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. I operate from the premise that this country, America, was founded on the principles and ideologies of racism and white supremacy, right? And that our country and its institutions were designed to oppress people of color, particularly African Americans in this context that we're talking about today, in order to maintain a racial hierarchy, as well as perpetuate status of servitude for people of color via their membership in minoritized groups. Right? So we have to be honest. And how do we know that, Gail? How do we know that my Novi community? How do we know that family? Because it is that enslavement, right? It is those ideologies that justify the enslavement of Africans in the first place. It is those ideologies that justify the genocide of our indigenous brothers and sisters, the robbing of their land, the robbing of their culture, the murder of their women, and raping of their women and children, right? And then the colonization that happened in this country, and then pushing them off their own land into reservations, right? And so we have to name that. We have to own that. We have to hold ourselves accountable. So when we think about racist acts, all racist acts aren't intentional. Brother Walker talked about that, right? It is the ideologies, it is the thinking or lack thereof that can be racist. Intent and intent has nothing to do with it. What I find in my work, a lot of racist ideologies and a lot of racism is based off ignorance, lack of knowledge. They have no clue. Now we know we have some folks who are very much happy operating in their racism, right? We got those folks as well. But just because you're ignorant of racism does not mean or cannot mean that you're not operating in it, right? So I just wanted to name that. And then another question, but I'll turn it over to one of the brothers and I'll follow up.
I haven't heard from you, Mr. Scott, in a minute.
Hey, Brother Scott, you mind if I jump in real quick? Because while still fresh in my head.
Absolutely. Go ahead. I'll defer to my younger brother. Go ahead.
Appreciate it, bro. So, because even just sitting here listening to everything Dr. Mark said, great job again, bro. Bros are amazing. But
yes, you are.
But, just even listening and thinking about that, it just something I brainstormed, thought about, like, why do we celebrate, or why is everyone, not saying it's a bad thing to celebrate, but why are so many people willing to celebrate Cinco de Mayo? Everybody willing to go get drunk and all of that, even though it's not Mexicans' Independence Day, but everybody's so willing to do that. Take off work. I've had coworkers say, I'm not coming in today, Cinco de Mayo, and all my friends, so where are we going to get drinks and tacos and all this stuff from? But, Juneteenth, there's barely any type of thing, all these other, even the Chinese New Year's, there's some people that even celebrate that and that becomes a thing. But for our culture, we just don't have the same enthusiasm when it comes to Juneteenth. It's just
Walker,
something
that sounds like a question that I would have asked. I like that. Somebody
I know, just something
that
thoughts that popped in my head. So
I want to hear some response to that. Why is it?
You go, Brother Scott.
On the spot, Mr. Scott.
Well, before I jump into that, I have to go back to the mellifluous segue that my brother Jay Marks had introduced, and I want to make a very poignant and salient comparison. As a young African-American boy, I was blessed. My mother sent me to a parochial school called Catholic School from the time I was in kindergarten to the 12th grade. This is during the late 60s, early 70s. And going back to what you were saying, Dr. Marks, how this polarization and affirmation of one group of individuals being superior to another group of individuals, how it is perpetuated in the classroom, and then it is also continued to be promulgated in media. When we turn on the TV. And Gail, going to your question is, Why should it be enthusiastically embraced? Now here I am as this young African-American male in the 5th and 6th grades in these Catholic schools, and I'm the only one or two maybe Black boys in this classroom, and I'm constantly hearing these remarks that seem uncomfortable, and I'm being called the N-word and being referred to, and the other students who are non-Black, they may not be racist, but they don't know how to deal with that. And a lot of times when we have these conversations, we want to take those individuals, non-Black, who feel uncomfortable having these conversations and give them a pass. But going back to what you were saying, Gail, is why aren't they as enthusiastic about embracing Juneteenth as Cinco de Mayo or any other national holiday? Is because it's simple. It's very simple. We have been perpetuating Black demonology, if you would, in this culture for quite some time. Anything associated with Black magic opposed to white magic. The connotation, and I know people are on this call saying, come on, we're still not doing this. You better ask Dr. Marks, who this is his forte and his specialty, that this pervasive theme is just as poignant and vehement now as it was decades ago, even more so. We are at a point now, and it is so funny having this conversation about Juneteenth, literally on the precipice of us being right now the most divisive, racially divisive country right now that we have ever been in our history. Our racial divide is palpable. So going back to your question, Gail, what do we do with these corporations that are giving people the day off and this day you get a free ride from Uber, whatever they're doing? And we want to say that's great, but what are you really doing? Are you putting money in the Black community? Huh? Are you putting platforms on education in these major corporations, diversity training and cultural awareness? See, that's when we find out if you're really serious about it, because as my brother said, we'll go celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and I done got drunk many times on St. Patrick's Day. We'll go celebrate Cinco de Mayo, and I done got drunk plenty of times on Cinco de Mayo. And Lord knows I done been out of my mind on the 4th of July. So why don't I, as a Black male, embrace that same enthusiasm? I'll be as transparent as possible, because in order for us to have these plenary conversations, we have to be transparent. So I hold my own self accountable, going back to what Dr. Mark says, that I have to start embracing my history, instead of letting somebody else dictate to me that I should be ashamed of it, embarrassed of it, or not having the voice to speak to it with the same enthusiasm that you hear coming across the screen. So I'm gonna give it to somebody else.
Who's going to follow that?
It's hard to follow Brother Scott.
It really is.
We almost didn't let him start off. You know, Brother Scott can go, and what he says makes so much sense. You know, you just want to hear that brother continue to talk. So, Brother Scott, thank you for that. One of the things, though, when we think about prioritizing and celebrating what we should be celebrating, for me, it goes back to what Brother Scott was saying, right? Like today is an opportunity to celebrate and bring awareness to Juneteenth. Today is a moment, if you will, Gail, right? But I want to urge our audience, we don't need moments. We need movements. We need movements, right? Going back to Brother Scott said, in terms of finance, right? Upliftment, right? Mentoring, tutoring, right? How do we institutionalize? How do we take our learning? How do we take the whole reason why we're celebrating Juneteenth and institutionalize it in our personal lives, as well as in our practices professionally, right? And what I mean by institutionalize it, make it a part of who we are and what we do, right? There are companies last summer, in the heat of the summer of 2020, in the midst and the heat of all the racial injustices, right? That were coming out with proclamations, resolutions, statements, positions, and all of those things, which are wonderful, but they're not sufficient, right? Because if we're not adding any meat to these bones, it could be considered highly performative, meaning that people are just saying, and they're with the rah, rah, rah. Like Brother Scott said, and Brother Walker said, people would celebrate Cinco de Mayo, right? Even though it's not the accurate day, right? But they would celebrate Cinco de Mayo. but would they fight for the liberation of brown people, Hispanic, Latino, right, Latinx people? Right? So I want you to recognize, honor, and be aware of Juneteenth. But if you're not willing to do anything about the liberation of Black people, right? Because I don't need you to respect or celebrate my culture, right? If you're not willing to respect my people, right? We got people, they go travel all over the world and we celebrate the cultures of human beings, but we despise the people. We despise the people. So I'm of the mindset of, yeah, I want you to be aware of it, but it means nothing to me if you're not gonna fight for the liberation, right? Because we have to ask ourselves, are we really liberated? When people who look like me, people who look like my fraternity brothers, oftentimes can't walk freely through our own communities where we pay taxes without the harm or the threat of being harmed by the people who are supposed to serve and protect us? Come on. So for me, right, if you're complicit, right, if you know what's going on and you choose to do nothing, just let me have my day, right, with my people. And my people are the people who want to celebrate my day, but also fight for what it means to be liberated, right, for Black, brown, and indigenous folk and other people of color in this country, right? That's what's important to me. That's what's important to me. I'll turn it over to someone else.
When I was looking to schedule this event, I was trying to find a day in the week that worked with the calendar, and it just happened to fall on Flag Day. So today is Flag Day, and it's Juneteenth. Let's talk a little bit about that. We don't have to go way deep into. I don't want it to be like a bashing of America. I'm not trying to do that. But how do you relate Juneteenth and the flag for which it stands for Flag Day? Is it representative of
I'll
what?
go ahead.
What's that?
I'll go ahead and jump in there, Gail. Go ahead.
Mr. Scott, okay, sure. You're
Well,
good.
it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because there's a gentleman on the news today. He has a display of flags in Southfield at the gallery in Southfield. And I was watching. He has these various variations of the American flag, and he incorporated a lot of ethnic groups. His ancestors were immigrants, and he highlighted that in the flags. And you're right, Gail. I am a Marine Corps veteran of the Persian Gulf War, and I am a proud Marine Corps veteran. And to all my fellow veterans, and when you talk about how does a flag relate, Gail, that is such an apropos question. I don't even know if you know how profound that is. And the reason why I mention that, you talk about Juneteenth and the flag. You see, Gail, in order to speak to this, you have to truly know our history. And to know our history is to know the integral role that Black, brown, and indigenous people have played in the shaping of America. So when you talk about Flag Day and Juneteenth, they are one and the same. They are. It is not an acrimonious. It's not a dichotomous situation. It is a confluence. It is a concerted, contemporaneous unification and juxtaposition with one another. I served my country in what can be arguably one of the most racist branches, but I took pride in that. You see, Gail, even as we are marginalized, and here's the dichotomy: Black people take pride in being in America, knowing that they are subjected to everything that has been eloquently spoken by Dr. Marks. We take pride in that, and we are hurt when we are not acknowledged or included in the inclusiveness of this conversation, of that conversation. So when you talk about falling on Flag Day, it is incumbent upon us to understand, for our non-Black individuals, that we take is Black people take as much pride in this country and being American. In fact, I would say that in some cases, that our pride and allegiance to being American supersedes our pride and allegiance to being African American in some cases. So as a Marine veteran, as you mentioned on Flag Day, I take tremendous pride in that, but at the same time, I struggle. I struggle with the fact that at times I know that I'm not recognized or I'm not marginalized, or that I am marginalized in that capacity. I don't know if my good brother Jay Marks want to jump in and add something to that, but that is my take. And I know speaking with so many older veterans that they have very difficult time verbalizing their emotions and sentiments regarding that same question that you asked, Gail, about it being Flag Day, and how does that resonate with them?
Thank you for your service, Mr.
I'm going to turn it over to Arlanda if he has something he wants to share. I just want to just real quick to what Brother Scott said. I want to quote another one of my heroes, James Baldwin. He says, "If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things that you can't see. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you can't see." And if you know anything about James Baldwin, he was a bad brother. James Baldwin was saying things to America that Americans weren't ready for in the 50s and 60s, right? But it's because of great love, right? Like Brother Scott said, great love for this country that we challenge this country, that we serve this country while also holding this country accountable, right? Holding itself accountable to its promises, its unfulfilled promises to Black and brown folk, right? I'm not a foreigner in this land. My ancestors built this country for free, free. So it is mine as much as it is anyone else's. But we have to love each other enough to be honest with each other, to challenge each other, to push each other, to nudge each other, to educate each other. That's what love looks like to me. In this space, that's what love looks like to me. Go ahead, Brother Walker.
Yeah, both of those brothers, man, y'all be doing so good, man. Y'all be putting a lot of pressure on me. But
Yeah, you're holding your own.
But yeah, I agree with both of what they said. And for me personally, coming from a millennial perspective, it's a struggle. It's a struggle because don't get me wrong, I love America. You know, I think it's one of the best countries in the world. You know, far none. But when you look at the flag and what it represents, you know, coming from Brother Scott, who's an ex-Marine, him being on the battlefield, you know, he wear the flag patch on, I think it's on the left side or, you know, right or left side, but they wear that flag on their left side. And if something happened to him while he's in the field, the foreigners, they'll recognize him. Oh, that's an American soldier right there. You know, I got an American soldier. That's an American soldier. I kept an American soldier. But the issue with that is when he goes back to that base, when he goes back to his barracks, his bunker or whatever, and the person he's sleeping in the same bunker with, look at that patch, like, oh, you shouldn't even be wearing that. He's fighting the same war with him, but you shouldn't be wearing that because you're a Black man. Like, who are you, you know? And that's one issue that, you know, I feel like a lot of Black people have with the American flag in general, is that they feel like it doesn't represent us, you know, because it wasn't even, you know, the national anthem. You know, the reason why we don't talk about the third stanza because it talks about slavery. It's a racist song, literally, you know. But I think that's one reason. Even with, you know, Colin Kaepernick, him taking a knee during the national anthem, even though he told everyone it wasn't to disrespect America, it wasn't to disrespect the flag, it wasn't to disrespect our military. The number one thing that a lot of white Americans said was that, you know, if you don't like this country, go back to where you come from. Well, I was born here. So where do y'all want me to go? Like, you know, it's stuff like that. But the fact that those people are even able to say that comment, it just shows that they don't even believe that this is our country. They don't even believe that we have any type of history within this country. The reason why our history is diminished down to 1 month, or it's not even in history books at all. The reasons why majority white schools and kids that grow up and not know anything other than Martin Luther King and maybe Rosa Parks, which is a big part of our history, but it's still a very small part of our history. So I just think that the reason why so many African Americans have a hard time with even showing the same patriotism as our counterparts, as in like flying a flag on your car or your house like that, is just because they so often remind us that we are not a part of this. We're not included in this. And anytime that we'll go against any type of, or we speak out or even try to show our own heritage, they're so quick to say, well, go back to your country. The whole Donald Trump thing during his presidency, that kind of showed how racially divided our country really was, and if you go against any ideologies of the masses or the people in power, it's, you don't love this place, go back to where you come from, and all these, they just constantly remind us that we are not included in one Independence Day. We're not included in what the red, white, and blue actually stands for. We wasn't included in the national anthem. So I think it's just hard. And I mean, Brother Scott can probably correct me if I was wrong about the Marine thing. But again, like from what I've heard and guys I've talked to that were in it, and even, I mean, it's history. Guys who would go overseas and put their lives on the line, Black men who would come back here and couldn't find housing, couldn't find a job, and still had to deal with Jim Crow and all of these different types of things. But this is the, we love the men and women that serve our military, but it's only certain people in that group that we actually really love, and the rest, you're still Black at the end of the day. So we appreciate what you did, but you're still Black, and that's one of the issues where I think so many people have with just America and that flag, our flag.
Some people were listening and jumped in along the way of our program. If you have any questions, you don't have to wait until the end. You can, and I have so many comments scrolling. I'm trying to monitor everything that's scrolling. But if you'd like to pose a question or a comment, please unmute yourself and feel free to express yourself. I also am looking at the chat and on Facebook or the comment section, so I do see your comments there. I don't know if I see a question, but if you do have one, I'm looking there, but feel free to join into the conversation. I'd love to hear one way or the other. You don't have to support what you're hearing. You could have a completely different view. I'd love to hear what you have to say on that. Either way. I think I asked this in some form, but I want to hear the answer again if I did. How should areas recognize Juneteenth other than closing on that day? What should be done? How do you acknowledge it?
I think simply it's just inform people what Juneteenth actually means. Being able to just going out and barbecuing or getting off of work early, if you don't really know what you're celebrating, I mean, it's really all for naught. It's just that a day that you got off of work. So I mean, I think programs like this where, maybe, even if everyone on here, if we catch one person who actually learned what Juneteenth was, or actually even decided, like, what, I'm gonna leave here and go research what it is, I think we did our job. So I think it just should be, just in some form, in some way, something to where we can educate people on what Juneteenth actually is.
And you can check out the Nova Public Library. We have many resources on that topic, including Dr. Marks, as you mentioned, Frederick Douglass and James Baldwin. Do some research there too. I've seen books on both in our library. If you'd like to read upon and educate yourselves, that could be helpful.
I see that Crystal has her hand up. I want to say one thing.
You see a hand?
Yeah, and in the chat. But before Crystal goes, I wanted to say that if you're, again, back to what I said earlier, acknowledging, learning, educating yourself is important, but it's not sufficient. If we're not willing to work towards eradication and dismantling of the systems that continue to hold Black and brown people in bondage in this country, why are we doing it? Why even know what it is if we're not willing to take action to do something about it, right? Because why do we want to know? We hope that knowledge, right? Knowledge is not power in and of itself. Knowledge in and of itself can be useless. It's knowledge that we use that is powerful, and we use it for the advancement of our humanity. That's when it's powerful. But just to know something is not enough to me, right? We have to know so that we can do. What are we willing to do now that we know? What are we willing to do now that we know what Juneteenth is? What actions are we willing to take, right? And if you are white brothers and sisters, right, based on your racialized privilege, right, how are you willing to use that privilege, right, to eradicate systems of oppression for people who look like me, right?
Absolutely.
But
Crystal?
Crystal had her hand up, Gail.
Yeah, let's hear from you, Crystal. You can unmute yourself. You can open up your video, whichever you prefer. We'd love to hear from you.
Sure. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's really eye-opening and just helps the overall push of understanding Juneteenth. But I had kind of a loaded question, and it's really for the entire panel. Just
I think we lost you.
to know your thoughts. So let's kind of address this, and I'm glad you guys took it to the education, because that's kind of what my question is about the classroom, but here it is. How as a country can we celebrate and recognize Juneteenth as a holiday or historic moment when we have pushback in the classroom about the critical race theory and the 1916 project? And what are the ways that we can combat this? With that being said, what can we do to combat the denial of systematic racism in the US? Since we're having this war against, again, like critical race theory and things like that. Thank you.
I'm gonna defer and let Brother Marks kick this off, then I'm gonna jump in because I truly do have my perspective on that, Crystal. That's a wonderful question, but I'm gonna defer to my distinguished colleague.
I'll just say a couple of things. One, and thank you for the question, Crystal. Yep, there's pushback on critical race theory, 1619 project. Some of it is based on ignorance. Some of it is white supremacy doing what it was designed to do, right? So we can't blame ignorance on all of what we're seeing and all the pushback, right? So, because some folks was like, well, we just need to educate folk more. We just need to let them know what it is. Now, some of the people know exactly what it is. That's why they're using it as a tool that they're using it for, right? When we see systems of oppression working like this, there's no mistake and there's nothing broken here. They're doing exactly what they were designed to do, what they were built to do. It just shocks some people that they didn't know that these were ideologies and principles and principalities that are operating for over 400 years in this country. So a part of it is educating people who just don't know, but a large part of it is being very vocal, right? There are people who are making noise, who are in opposition to critical race theory, right? And again, we know that these are just theories, frameworks, ideologies, right? But there's people who are in opposition to this. There are people in opposition of using 1619 project as a curriculum. But where are the people who are in support of it? What I tell parents all the time, you need to be just as vocal as the opposition. I would like to believe in most of our communities, can't say all, but I would like to believe in most of our communities, we have more people who are supportive of work that advances equity, right? I would like to believe that. Maybe I'm being naive, right? But I would like to believe that, but we're not vocal. We're not as vocal as the opposition. The opposition, they are out there vocal with bullhorns, right? And in some places, a small minority group of people who hold a lot of political, social, economic power, right? In other places, they're a majority of people. But where are the people who are supportive? And those are the voices we need to hear from. So we need parents, we need students. And I always say, and I tell you, I'm 53 years old. I'm a little older, but the young people are on fire. If you want something done, give it to the young people. They ain't afraid, they ain't scared. They will stand in front of a board in a minute and say, this is how I'm treated in your school that you're responsible for the governance over, right? You give it to them babies, and those babies show up every month, right, on fire. Where are the parents who could show up at every monthly board meeting and say, this is what I need to happen because I need my child, with my tax dollars, to feel safe, included, protected, knowing that they will be seen and heard, and knowing that they will be treated fairly in our schools. So we need just as much momentum, if not more momentum, on those of us who support advancing racial equity as opposed to those who are opposed to it and want to counter it.
Thank you. I have a
Great
question.
job, Brother Marks.
Very good. As a hand up, I see you, Tia Marie, but I have also one here on Facebook, a question that says, what if people have the knowledge but continue to purposely hurt Black colleagues? Who can address that?
I'll let Brother Scott go.
Yes, who had, before I get into that, answer that question, I want to go back to what Brother Marshall said. I won't go back and beat a horse to death because he was obviously Grammy Award winning correct when he said what he said. But I will just say, when he said about give it to
you
the
brothers really love each other, don't you?
when he said give it to the babies, I have to concur. Going back to Crystal's question about what she mentioned 1619, you're absolutely correct. I believe our youth are the ones who will turn this thing around. We have to believe that. We have to pass this torch on to them because they're seeing a different man. They're seeing the macrocosm, not the microcosm of this whole thing. And they're filtering, and when they see it, they're like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't fit. The point I want to make to polarize this is I was watching when the Black Lives Matter movement. Those are a young teenager in Texas holding the Black Lives Matter sign up, and he caused so much vitriol from people of non-color. Why are you holding that sign? I'll get out and do this to you, this, that, and the third. And here's the thing. Going back to your question, Crystal, we can't be afraid, and I think that's what Dr. Marks is alluding to. We can't be afraid. I hate to say it that I got a little bit more. I've heard a little bit more thunder and lightning than Dr. Marks, and as we get older, our zeal to fight is truncated. So we're not as quick to jump out there. We're not as quick to get into the streets. But these young kids that on Twitter and Instagram and all that, they're ready to get into the front lines of this battle. Going back to your question, Sister Gail, which I've completely forgotten now based on my enthusiasm. Listen to my.
That's okay. Someone posted, what if people have knowledge but continue to purposely hurt Black colleagues? And that can go to anyone who can answer.
Yeah, I'll just briefly say that if you have the knowledge, and that is that systemic intentionalism, racism that is based on just fear, and that's not giving them a way out. That's not giving them a exit of fear. We know that. I go back to my just being my time in being the only or one of very few Black boys in a Catholic school in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. I know that I'm performing as well as my colleagues. I know this, but yet and still, they're getting the praise, and I'm getting the discipline. And that's why I am that's why I don't. Well, I won't get into that topic, but I'll just quickly say this: if you're going to study James Baldwin, be prepared. You better be prepared to study James Baldwin. Okay, he ain't for the average person. You got to really want to delve into something when you get into James Baldwin. And I'll defer to someone else.
We do have a question by our sister Tia Marie.
Sure.
Gail.
Yes, I was going to get to her. Are we done answering that other one
Yes.
about the?
I'm done answering it.
Sure, Tia Marie, how are you? Can unmute yourself. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, I am unmuting and there's my picture.
There you
Hello,
are.
everybody. Thank you so much. First of all, to all my brothers on the panel, God bless every single one of y'all for dropping truth right now.
Oh, Tia,
And I do know you have
dear.
I know you have to wear your mask probably wherever you
Yeah,
are.
we can't hear you.
Really hear you.
I just see that. No, I was just saying thank you very much to my brothers on the panel. Some of y'all didn't know I got my heart. Thank you to the community for watching. Thank you to Gail for posting this picture, and thank you to the Novi Public Library. What I hope, and I hope that you all are hearing very loud and clear, this is not the type of thing that we have time to address. There's an urgency to what needs to happen to fight and dismantle systemic white supremacy. So what all these brothers are saying as politely and as kindly and as gently as they possibly can, you must hear, and I hope that you hear and feel the urgency in their voices. For every day that you wait to read, for every day that you wait to use your voice, for every day and moment that you wait to figure out if this is a conversation that you want to be in, I need you to do so understanding that you are stepping over the bodies of Black people who are in your wake as you wait. That is the urgency. So yes, it is right now. Yes, it is reparations right now. Yes, all of these things need to happen right now. So if you're not sure where you are, get with someone who's a level just above where you are to get some help to get there. Do not require Black people to reach all the way down to where they have to help you get all the way up because it costs them every time that they do. I hope and I pray that we in this community and every part of the community that can hear our voices takes today, Juneteenth, which is what a historic holiday should mark, takes this day to step up, step forward, come out to your Black friends, come out to your Black colleagues and tell them that you are an anti-racist activist. And what do you need from me to be that kind of support? And if you are not putting dollars behind the words that you say that you mean about being anti-racist within the first 30 days of encountering and understanding what the problems are, then please get out of the fight because you are in the way. If it's not your dollars, find someone else's dollars to support that cause by raising money, letting people know in your community, but come out as an anti-racist. My brother Jay Marks always says something that I have to say is one of my mantras. If you want me or the Black community to believe that you're an anti-racist, we must see your anti-racist behavior. What does that look like? Talk to your Black colleagues, talk to your Black neighbors. It is by their standard that you are showing up as an anti-racist. Anything less than that, you are not ready. Please get out of the way. Go do your background, go do your check, go read your books. But we right now, because of the urgency on our lives, we need you to show up today, starting today, with those dollars, with that support, and coming out as an anti-racist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tia Marie. Anyone have anything to comment behind that?
You should have had her on the panel.
Yeah, that's the passion that that we need. Yeah, you're right. Kudos to that young lady. I mean, there's nothing else really to say. She was really impassioned. That's the fire that we need to catch. That's the fire that is the incendiary spark that we should burn like wildfires through us all. And I think that unfortunately for people of color, black and brown people, that we have to get over being embarrassed about our legacy. We have to get over being embarrassed about taking pride in what we bring to the table. And I know it's difficult, as Dr. Marks has said, because we have been so marginalized for so long that systemic psychosomatic marginalized racism, mental raping, if you would, is real. So we do have to get over that. We have to learn. Let's face it. Black people have to learn to love themselves. And I hate to say that, but that is a part of the education process. We have to learn to love ourselves.
Someone else have something to say on it? Okay, as we love ourselves, what can we do to get other people to love us as well? Or do they just we have to accept the kind of love we get? Mr. Walker, put you on the spot.
Yeah,
Should we just be grateful? I've heard people say just blend in and accept what you have.
I don't think we should be grateful because
talk on that.
I don't think we should just be grateful for whatever we get, because that's what we've kind of been doing for years, is just accepting, as reality, accepting this as our norm. And that's what we're trying to break out of. So I think we still need to continue to keep fighting for what we want. And like what Sister Sanders said, we kind of have to have these uncomfortable conversations. So, if a person is just, I understand and I see it, it's okay. We should be afraid to show our pride or show our concern or voice our issues in any situation, in any environment, on a job, or, you know, in the field, anywhere. We should be, you know, embraced to do those type of things. And if it makes them uncomfortable for us talking about racism or us talking about slavery or whatever it is, then that's not a problem that we shouldn't have to continue to cater our conversation for the uncomfortable people, because this is our American history. Racism is a part of America. Slavery is a part of America, all these different types of things. So I don't think that we should be, I don't think we should accept anything less than non-racism. I think we should just, you know, unless somebody is willing to jump out in that field, jump on that bullet with us, and, you know, be on that front line and, you know, holding Black Lives Matter and all that with us. You know, if they're not supporting that, then, you know, they're in the way. And like she said, and, you know, that's
Do you
pretty much all
think
I have on it.
dialogues like this, I'm sorry, do you think dialogues like this make a difference to people in power?
Yes, because again, like these conversations are just dialogue is uncomfortable for a lot of people. You know, some people don't want to hear about slavery. That's the reason why it's not in the history books. Some people don't want to hear about racism and, you know, what things we consider racist, you know, because it's uncomfortable. And that's one issue with just America, is that we don't like to have uncomfortable conversations. So, you know, I mean, I let one of my brothers add in on that
Yeah, I'd
one.
like to hear someone else respond to
I
that. Do
wanna,
these dialogues make a difference?
They can. Again, conversation is not enough. Why are we talking? What is the end goal? What are we going to do as a result of the conversation? I challenge each and every one of us, including myself, after this panel discussion. What are we going to do? I wake up every morning and look in the mirror and say, Jay Marks, what are you going to do with this system that you inherited? That you didn't create, but you inherited, and your ancestors chipped away at it so that you have less of this mess to deal with. You still going to have some. So how much less of this mess am I going to leave for my two beautiful teenage daughters and for your children, right? And I ask myself that question every day, right? So conversations can be fruitful and important, but if they don't lead to change, if they don't lead to systemic change, right, then why are we talking? Because here's the thing, Gail, and I've been doing this long enough where I have to challenge folks on these conversations. Who benefits from talking? Who benefits from talking? Members of the dominant culture, right? White identifying folk, cisgender straight folk, middle-class folk, men, right? Those who have power benefit from talking, because you know what they can say? We talked about it, or we're having conversations, or I hear you. But if the conversations aren't designed to lead to some type of systemic action, then why are we talking systemically? Because this right here is a program where you have far reach. So why are we talking if it's not going to lead to anything? It's almost like a relationship, right? I'm imagining many of us on here, probably all of us are adult, been in some relationship, and you and your loved one, your spouse, your partner get into a little bit of a tat, a little bit of a conflict over an issue. There's some people smiling because they're like, yeah, I had one this morning, Jay. How you? Anywho, you have, and then folks want to talk about them. Talking is good, but is our conversation going to lead to you changing your behavior? Or we're going to be talking about this again in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, right? So conversations can be helpful if they're designed to lead to something. Just like book studies. I tell people all the time, book studies can be wonderful if they lead to something different, if they lead to a change of behavior. If not, why are we reading a book? Because awareness of itself is not sufficient. I want to share one last thing, Gail, because I know we're getting out of time.
Sure.
And you asked a question that I wrote, I wrote, and I want to provide an answer for, because you had asked us a question about what does this mean for African Americans today? And I want to share this, and I'll turn it over to one of my brothers. But what does this mean to African Americans today? It is my hope that it means a sense, when we talk about Juneteenth, not literally today, but Juneteenth. What does it mean? It's my hope that it means a sense of pride in the struggle resilience, and strength of our ancestors, right? To fight for not just their liberation, but for our liberation. It is also, I believe, an opportunity for African Americans to celebrate the beauty of our culture, our liberation, and our Blackness unapologetically, with a great sense of joy, love, and pride. It is important for our children to know, particularly our Black children, but all of our children, but particularly our Black students, to know that African Americans, again, are not the descendant of slaves, but rather the descendant of a free people who were kings and queens, builders and creators, doctors and lawyers, engineers and mathematicians, artists and activists, philosophers and priests, who were enslaved legally in this country for over 250 years. And again, I'm not even including Jim Crow, redlining, and all of those Black codes and all those things. But also, Gail, this moment, this opportunity of Juneteenth provides us a context for the inequities that African Americans are continuing to face today broadly. As it relates to education, we can talk about healthcare, the criminal justice system, employment, the military, housing, our financial institutions. The racial injustices that African Americans continue to experience today are directly connected to and rooted in the system of white supremacy that was designed to marginalize and oppress us. And so we have to name that. And we have to name that so we know what we're fighting. So we know what we're fighting, we know what we're dealing with. So I want to go back to what I said earlier. When we talk about liberation, because that's what Juneteenth represents, freedom. But how free are Black people in this country, again, when they can't walk the streets, their own streets in their own community, but they can't go into a bank and get a loan, when they are criminalized in our society, and when our students are criminalized in our schools, simply for the color of their skin. As Brother Scott mentioned, when he talked about his experiences as students, right? And so I want Black children, I'll close with this, right? Because we're forced as Black people to always be aware of our racial identity in every moment of our socialization in this country, because of what may happen to us when we're not. So what I want for our Black children, our Black babies, our African-American children, to have a liberating schooling experience, because I'm an educator, to have a liberating schooling experience where they can be free to be their authentic selves in our schools, like our white students are, as it relates to their racial identities. That's what I want. And Juneteenth can be an opportunity for us to pursue that collectively, right? All right, I'm done.
Very good. Also, I want to read a comment in the Facebook. I am looking at your comments here. This is actually from one of our library board members who says conversation needs to be met with action and programs need to lead to change. So that is a response to one of the questions that I asked. I thought that was very powerful. We just have a few more minutes and I want to do closing remarks. Leave an impact, a minute or two.
Real quick, just
closer to a minute. Leave an impact on a really strong, I'm putting the pressure on, Mr. Scott. People are listening. If they didn't get anything out of any of this, which I hope they did, leave a strong message that will stick.
I really will. Since my dubious Brother Marks opened up with a quote from Frederick Douglass, I'll close with one. Frederick Douglass said, "It is vain to talk about being men if we do not the work of men." It is so ironic, Gail, that that a female put this together. Women have been doing the weightlifting when it comes to raising and getting the Black culture where it needs to be through civil rights and for decades. It is time that we as Black men take the lead on this and just move to the forefront on putting ourselves in a situation to where we recognize and define who we are as a culture, and how we want to leave our legacy, as Dr. Mark said. I also want to close with this. Finally, if you study Juneteenth, shortly thereafter was the Compromise of 1877, where the powers that be were restored back to the Confederate soldiers that were not supposed to have land, but they were. It paralleled that with the legislation push that's going on in Georgia, with the voter suppression, and trying to remove, to make it very difficult for Black voters to vote in Georgia. So we want to make sure that history does not repeat itself. So if I leave you with nothing else, this is a day of liberation. This is a day of enlightenment, but we also want to make sure that this is the day that we does not allow it to repeat ourselves by once again holding Blacks in bondage. Thank you. And I appreciate you, Gail, for this forum.
Very good. I appreciate you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Walker, you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, mine is very simple and quick. Kind of just like what Dr. Mark said, you know, and the brother's intelligent. But I just want to say Juneteenth is a very important day. Yes, we definitely need education on it. Yes, we definitely need conversation on it. Yes, it needs to be celebrated. And I hope that everyone on this call who are listening do celebrate Juneteenth. But like Dr. Mark said a million times, getting educated is just a small part. If you're not out here actually putting in work, action, you know, if you're not doing things with that education, then, you know, all this is for naught. You know, if you're not willing to jump out and, you know, be on the front line with us, jump in front of that bullet and, you know, stop that white police officer from shooting a black teen or any of that, then you're in our way. So the only thing that I would just want to leave everyone with is just, you know, instead of just be getting out and celebrating with some barbecue and, you know, a few drinks, you know, also think about the effect that you can pass down to your kids, or, you know, or the things, the ideology you pass down to your kids, or just your, you know, other friends and things like that. Because, you know, yes, Juneteenth is an important day, but we have 300 plus days that is just as important as Juneteenth that Black people are continuing to fight through. So that's the only thing I have.
Very good.
Thank you. And I appreciate you for inviting me. Thanks, Brother Scott, Brother Marks.
Absolutely.
You know, Gail, you're amazing. I just want to thank, you know, for just allowing me to be in this call. So
For sure. Thank you. The pleasure is actually mine. You know what, Dr. Marks, I want you to have like 30 seconds, but I did see a hand up and I don't want to skip it. And we do have like a couple of more minutes. It was Jason. You had your hand up, and I'd like to give you a minute or so to comment. You good?
Thank you so much, Gail. I just want to, I'll keep it very brief so that our panelists can have the last words. I just wanted to extend a challenge to any of the white audience members that are listening. As a white male, I want to challenge you to stretch your mind and think about, if you're not interested in celebrating Juneteenth as your holiday, as an American holiday, why? If you are for freedom that's declared in the Declaration of Independence and celebrate the 4th of July, why not celebrate Juneteenth when all Americans were finally made free? If you believe that, we are all endowed with inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then why don't you join us in celebration of Juneteenth when we can celebrate the day when America finally took a step down the path of finally making that true? So I would just challenge those listening tonight to really think about, if they're learning it for the first time, or if they've heard about it before and they really weren't that keen on it, don't look at it as a culture's holiday that's not yours. Look at it as your holiday because you are an American and we are celebrating something that America did right. There's a lot of things we have to work on, but let's take time to celebrate something that was done right and accept it as a positive, something we can all celebrate together.
Thank you very much, Jason. I also want to acknowledge Julie Farkas, our library director, who I inadvertently changed her name to Gail Anderson because I thought ZoomTube was me and it's her, but she did thank the panelists and appreciated all of your time and your words. So I wanted to let you know that she did respond and she is listening. Last few 30 seconds, Dr. Marks.
Well, here's the thing, right? We don't need moments, we need movements. So what are you going to do differently after you celebrate June 19th? And I ask everybody to commit to one thing. I appreciate what Brother Jason said to our white brothers and sisters, right? What is your role in this space, right? I like to use the words of Dr. Bettina Love, who she talks about moving from an ally to accomplice, from an accomplice to a co-conspirator. And she said co-conspirator is someone who's willing to put something on the line for the liberation of somebody else, something on the line, right? Even if that includes, like Brother Walker said, your own life. Are you willing to put your life on the line for the liberation of someone else? And we have a history of that in this country, right? That's not a new phenomenon, right? So for me, what are you willing to do next? Right? What are you willing to do? And I ask everybody, I'm challenging everyone. I'm with you, Jason. I'm challenging everybody to choose one thing you're going to do for the liberation of Black and brown people in this country that you're not doing right now. If you're a banker, you can think about what small businesses, Black-owned businesses, right? You could provide some opportunities to, right? Housing that you could provide some loans to for Black folk, right? How can you use your position, your privilege, right, to advance racial equity? And then the last thing I want to say, and this was brought up earlier, right? If you say you're not a racist, right, in which, you know, knowing how this society was created, I don't know how any of us have not been impacted by the forces of racism, right? But if you say you're not a racist, are you an anti-racist? In which Tia Marie eloquently said for us, right? Anti-racist means you are doing something. So if you say you're not a racist, yet you're not an anti-racist, why not? Because an anti-racist means you're doing everything in your power to eradicate systems of oppression in this country based off race. Because to say I'm not a racist is a very passive statement to me. And I could be complicit in my racism by saying I'm not a racist, because that's those other folk with the white hoods on and the tiki torches. That ain't me, and using those racial slurs, that ain't me, right? But if you're complicit, meaning you know about these functions and you're doing nothing, can you really call yourself, can you really say, right, that you're not operating in racism? And so I just put that out there. We don't need movements, we need moments. I mean, we don't need moments, we need movement. So let's move, family, let's move. Gail, thank you for inviting me. My brothers, Brother Scott and Brother Walker, I'm so proud of you all. Thank you all for allowing me to be in community with you, although I'm always in community with the frat. But in this forum, it was very special to be in community.
Absolutely. Mr. Scott, I don't say you that much anymore. Lean forward so people who just tuned in late, I lost half of your camera. There you go.
I took a lead from my brother, Jay Marks, and I borrowed Frederick Douglass' beard. I do rent this on the weekend for those of you who do not know. My prep was to do so. I do allow them to rent this on the weekend, but you won't get the same discount that they get, but I do rent this on the weekend.
And I do want to mention, if you, conversations like this are going on everywhere. If you are part of Oakland County, or even if you're not, I want to see if I can share my screen and in this, see if this will work. I'm not sure.
Great job, brothers. I appreciate it. Much love. Tremendous.
Let's see if I can share this one. Can we see that on the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, it is. I think we're kind of maybe blocking it, but you're invited, Oakland County Executive David Coulter, for our panel discussion, Juneteenth Then and Now. Panelists will address the systemic barriers that we have overcome as people while challenging the nation that we have already accomplished justice. And you can see the panels. I don't know if it's blocked, but one of the panelists is Dr. J. Marks. This is going to take place.
Our very own.
Yes, Thursday, June 17th at 6 p.m. And you can register for this free event at the Oakland County website. That's oakgov.com. So you can check that out, and the conversation will continue. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I want to say thank you so much to my guests. I enjoyed this conversation. This is powerful. Mr. Walker, Mr. Scott, and Dr. J. Marks. I appreciate your time and everything that you contributed to making a difference and bringing light to this subject. And I am hoping that this has impacted you in some way. Everyone who's listening, do some research, make a difference, try and move forward and help the advancement of equality and justice for all. So thank you, everyone. Have a good evening, and please tune in. We're going to have many more programs to come, and they're not always about this. We have so many fun programs and serious programs. So check out our website, check out our Facebook page, and follow us for further information. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
All right, bros.
All right,
thank
bros.
you, Novi community.
Yes, thank you, Novi.
Much love.